My makeup while we talk about how we teach toddlers consequences and what is okay to do if we're not using timeout. Because there's this misconception that if we don't use timeout when our toddlers have a huge tantrum, or when they throw, or when they hit, or when they do any sort of tricky behavior that we don't want them to do, we don't put them in timeout, then they're not actually learning real consequences. They're not actually learning, hey, it's not okay for me to do that. And then there's this fear that as they get older, they're going to keep doing those sort of behaviors, which obviously we don't want, and gets more and more dangerous the bigger they get. You have to remember that in the moment is only one part of the learning equation, and we can set boundaries in the moment. We can help our toddlers self-regulate, but we have to come back and teach them, actively teach them what else to do in those tricky situations. For example, my youngest is about to turn 2. I wanted him to clean up his trains the other day. And so I handed him a train. I said, let's put these away in the bucket, buddy, before we go have our snack. And he said, no. And he threw the train back on the floor. Okay. I could absolutely say, if you are not going to be nice and put your trains away, we're going to go to timeout and set that consequence. But that's not actually teaching him what he needs to learn. In that moment, I can set a boundary and I can say, hey, I understand if you're frustrated, you don't want to clean up, but we're not going to throw things because that could hurt people. I can set that boundary. I'm going to help him work through it, and we're still going to pick up the train before we have a snack, but he doesn't need timeout. And the thing that's actually going to make a bigger difference is I'm going to make a mental note in my head of, hey, I've now noticed that he is having a hard time when he feels frustrated. He's wanting to throw. So we're going to practice some other ways that he can handle his frustration. So maybe later that afternoon, I'm going to pull out some activities from my Wild Hands activity guide that help him express his frustration in a healthier way, like throwing beanbags on the floor or doing power hands, etc. And I'm going to have him practice that. We're going to play a game, and then I'm going to be like, hey, next time you're feeling frustrated, this is what we can do. We can't throw trains at mom, but we can do power hands and get that frustration out before we clean our toys. I'm going to teach him. I'm going to help him learn what is appropriate. That's where I'm putting my effort, and that's where I'm putting my focus. Not just on telling him that the bad behavior, quote unquote, bad behavior is bad and unacceptable.